Good morning. This is Melody Joy Quilts, and I'm Melody Joy, and we're going to talk t-shirt quilts. So it is May. It is the season of graduations, and possibly you have a child, a grandchild, a niece or a nephew, someone who's about to graduate high school or college, and they have maybe possibly requested from you a t-shirt quilt. So we're going to talk t-shirt quilts today. Prepping them, how to get your shirts ready to go in a t-shirt quilt. I have started working on prepping here. I have an entire bag full of shirts here that are from my brother and his wife, my brother and sister-in-law. They were both collegiate athletes, and so I have all these different pieces. Now, my brother already did half the work for me in prepping the shirts, because the first thing you're going to want to do if you're getting a t-shirt quilt ready is rough cut it out. So as you can see here, the shirt has already been cut with scissors and roughly cut around. Now, this is not ready to put into a quilt yet. Our goal is to take it from this, which is just, this is what we're gonna call rough cut, and this is what we're gonna call prepped and ready. And so prepped and ready means that it has been fused to interfacing and cut down to size. And so I'm gonna just show you how we take it from this to this. Now, as you can see, when it's just rough cut, the edges kind of roll on you because it's like a knit material. So the edges roll, and this would be very hard to sew together into a quilt at this stage. So what I'm gonna show you today is how to take it from that to this. Now, a few notes. One is the size of your design is gonna dictate your shape, right? So if possible, I'm gonna cut it down to a 12.5-inch square, so the finished size within the quilt would be 12 inches. But what if you have a much smaller design, such as this? So sometimes you're gonna have smaller pieces. Later on in the video, we're gonna talk about what to do with your smaller pieces and your larger pieces, how you'll be able to fit that into a quilt. I just wanna show you real quick an example. This is a small t-shirt quilt that I made. A few years ago, our family went to Disney World, and I had ordered these shirts, and we had the greatest day of our life at Animal Kingdom. I mean, it was just a perfect family vacation day. So I wanted to commemorate that trip and put those shirts into a quilt. Well, the thing about it was, not everything was the same size. The adult shirts were much larger, and the kids' shirts were much smaller. So what I did to make it fit on the quilt was I added sashing, and where needed, I added extra strips of background here to make it all fit. So don't be concerned if when you're cutting out your t-shirts right now, that you're ending up with small sizes and larger sizes. It's gonna be okay. I'll show you some methods of how to get that worked out. Now, you're gonna need some interfacing. I am using today the Pellon 911FF, which is Fusible Featherweight Interfacing. The featherweight means that even after you put the interfacing in, it's gonna be sort of bendable and flexible. You can still get nice crisp edges when you cut so that you can, have it very neat looking, but it's bendable. So that's like the featherweight. You don't wanna get really stiff interfacing, because then you're gonna end up with a really stiff quilt. And if this quilt is gonna be hung on a wall, that might be okay if it's gonna be a wall hanging. But if you want this t-shirt quilt to actually be used, go for something like featherweight. So again, this is the 911FF Pellon Fusible Featherweight Interfacing, okay? So I'm gonna show you how to take the interfacing. It comes in a roll like this, and taking a rough cut shirt, and I'm gonna show you right now how to get it into the squares for quilting. I gotta move my cats first. I think they like this because the wool pressing mat holds heat, so the cats are very attracted to the heat, but I'm gonna have to move you babies, okay? Let me just move you. So I've got my interfacing, I've got my shirt. I'm gonna lay my shirt, so this is the design. I'm gonna lay this design with the front of the t-shirt is gonna go down on my mat. So I am working with the back of the t-shirt. I'm gonna smooth this out. As you can see, like I said, my brother already rough cut these. This is a very rough cut, but that's all good. I'm gonna take my fusible interfacing, and all I'm gonna do right now is rough cut it down to size. So I'm just going to trim this down to about the approximate size Now it's hanging over on the sides here. So I want to go ahead and trim it up again also on this side over here. The thing with the interfacing is you want all of it to be contained within your t-shirt. You don't want any of your interfacing hanging over the edge, because when you iron this together, the fusible part makes like a glue. It's like heat activated, and it's like gonna glue this on the back. If it's hanging over onto your pressing surface, you will end up fusing this to your ironing board. So make sure that the entirety of your interfacing is contained within the t-shirt and that none of it's hanging over the edge. This is very important. This will save you a lot of grief. The other really important thing is to make sure that the bumpy side is down. The bumpy side is the little glue dots that are gonna melt. If this is facing towards your iron, you're gonna iron that, you're gonna fuse it to your iron. So we don't want that. We wanna fuse it to the shirt. So we're gonna put the bumpy side of the interfacing to the back of our shirt, and we're gonna make sure that it's all contained within the edges of the shirt. Now, I find it easiest to have a little pressing cloth. This is just from a layer cake. It doesn't matter what your fabric is. What I'm gonna do right now is, once I have everything smoothed out really nicely, I'm gonna lay this down. Again, this is just an extra level of protection for my iron. And then we're gonna apply some firm pressure and press this down. The heat is gonna activate the glue so that we can glue, basically heat glue, fuse our interfacing to our shirt. And a pressing mat just means that you've got a piece of fabric. We're just using a piece of fabric between the interfacing and our iron to protect our iron, okay? I'm gonna lift this off, and so now it's fused on this side. So if I try to lift it on this side, I can't. Now this side is not fused yet, so this side is still loose. This side is now glued down. You can move it or leave it in place, it doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna, again, make sure I've got all the wrinkles out really nicely. I'm gonna lay my cloth on it, and again, just really try to make sure I've got it smooth. You wanna smooth it before you apply the heat. Otherwise, you're gonna iron in wrinkles. If you have a giant wrinkle and you iron it that way, you've just set it with glue. So make sure that it's smooth, and then we're gonna apply our heat. And again, the purpose of the interfacing is just so that we can cut this into squares or rectangles and have it maintain its shape without all the edges just rolling up on us. You don't need any kind of a fancy iron to do this, and you just need an ironing board, a flat surface that's, you know, heat protected, some type of ironing board. I'm using this cut and press, Quilter's cut and press, and then I have a wool pressing mat on top of it, and that's all I'm using. Okay, so once we are fused, so now it's fused on there, and you can already tell the part that has the interfacing is holding its shape better, and the part that doesn't is still very like rolly. So the next part is to go ahead, make sure I'm not rolling over any cats. Okay, the next step is to trim this down. So if possible, I'm gonna use this 12.5-inch ruler because I would love to get a 12-inch block, but I don't think in this part, this shirt, what I had to work with is gonna end up being 12 inches. I might be able to get 12 inches wide, but I'm probably not gonna be able to get 12 inches this way. I just, from looking at it, I don't think I am, and that's okay. What I'm gonna do is take my ruler and see, I can get 12 inches wide. So a good thing to do is try to find a line on your ruler, and if your words are in a straight line, go ahead and just pick a line on your ruler to line it up with. So I'm thinking you want to leave maybe even like a 1/2 inch below so you have room for the seam allowance. So I'm gonna go 1 inch. I'm gonna go 1 inch. I'm gonna put this 1 inch line here along the bottom of these words, and that way I know that this line is gonna be straight. Okay. Now I've got about 2 inches or so on either side here. I think I want to move it a tiny bit this way so that I have about 1 3/4 inches and about I'm trying to just kind of make sure I've about equal distance on either side here. And then I have this line across the bottom there. Okay, it does not have to be perfect, but you kind of want your design to be centered within what you're cutting, and as much as possible perpendicular, straight with your words. You could make it wonky, you could make it wonky on purpose, but I'm actually trying to make sure, my brother's an engineer, so I'm trying to make this as, you know, neat and tidy as possible and centered. I think it'll look better that way. So now all I'm gonna do is take a rotary cutter and I'm gonna just start trimming off these edges, okay? I have a rotating cutting mat, but it's just slightly bigger than 12 inches, so it doesn't actually work super great. I'm gonna just gently slide this around so I can trim that last side. Okay, so I gotta make sure I'm lined up again. I think it slipped on me a tiny bit. Okay. Now, this is looking pretty good, but it's too short, right? So what I'm gonna have to do next is just decide how, I've got it the 12.5 inches wide. But the up and down is gonna be not that high. So I'm just gonna take my regular long ruler now and I'm gonna just pick, so I did 1 inch, I have this cut 1 inch below the words there. So I will just go 1 inch up from the top of the F and just try to get that on there nice and neat. As much as possible here. I'm lined up nicely. Okay, so that way, again, the goal is to try to center, all of this is just gonna be waste. Anything that gets trimmed off here, this is just waste, so you can toss that. So now I have a piece that is 12.5 inches wide. It ended up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7.25 inch tall. The height is 7.25, and my width is 12.5. So when I go to put this into the quilt, if I take another piece that is also the 12.5 inches wide, this will be easy to sew this to this, and I can end up making a column. Some of these pieces, I will end up adding fabric strips to it to make it 12.5 inches wide, and then that way I can add these in as well. I'm gonna wait until I have I've gone through the whole bag and fused all of the shirts and cut them all down. As much as possible, I want 12.5 inches wide. It will just make it really easy to make a column, and then the height doesn't matter. I can kind of just stack them up. The smaller pieces we're gonna work on separately, but for right now, I am just going to continue on with prepping. And I'm basically gonna have 2 piles. The piles of the shirts that are 12.5 inches wide, and the pile, so this is my 12.5 inch wide, and then anything that was less than that ended up being smaller is gonna go in its own pile. And again, the main thing is when you're cutting it out is making sure that you leave yourself at least 1/2 inch to 1 inch all the way around your design. That way, when you do your seam allowance, you're gonna lose part of this when you sew it into the quilt. So if you only cut it 1/4 inch away, you're gonna end up losing part of your design. So make sure that you give yourself at least 1/2 inch to 1 inch all the way around the design that you wanna showcase when you cut it out. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, now this one is a much larger piece, and I probably will be able to get a full 12.5 by 12.5 inch square out of it because this is a larger piece. The only slight pressure with t-shirt quilts is that the material that I'm working with, I cannot get more of. If I'm cutting into like Kona snow, there's multiple retailers online where you could buy more of that. So no pressure. If you mess up on cutting it, no sweat, right? You can just get more. These t-shirts, there's NCAA t-shirts in here, there's high school shirts in here. They're not replaceable. So I do want to take my time and be as careful as I can with getting these prepped and ready because these are memories and I can't replace them. I can't just go buy another steeplechase shirt, you know, from 2018 or whatever. Okay, I am going to lay this on here again. The goal is that it's smooth, that I have the bumpy side going to the back of the t-shirt. So the design of my t-shirt is facing my mat. I have the bumpy side of my interfacing touching the back of the shirt. and I have nothing touching my cutting mat. I'm going to just smooth it out with my hands, making sure it's as smooth as possible, and I've removed as many wrinkles as I can with my hands. I'm gonna lay a cloth over it to protect my iron, and then I'm gonna apply heat. And you do have to apply a little bit of pressure. You don't have to press super hard, but apply a little bit of pressure. And I have it just set on cotton is the heat setting on my iron, okay? So that's looking pretty good. So now I'm gonna come down and do this corner. Again, just smoothing with my hands, applying the cloth, smoothing it again, just really making sure I have it nice and smooth, and then applying heat. For this project, I would recommend just putting on a movie you've seen 100 times, or listening to a podcast or a book on tape or something, because it can get a little bit repetitive, right? Okay, now I'm just gonna turn this around so I can do the other side. So that's looking pretty good. So now I'm gonna do this side. Just really make sure it's smooth, and then apply my heat. Depending on the amount of shirts you have and the size of the logos that you're working with is going to end up determining the size of your t-shirt quilt. Now, you can set the size of your t-shirt quilt, and anything that doesn't fit, you just reject. But in this case, my goal is to actually use all of these shirts. So I think this is gonna end up being a fairly large t-shirt quilt, the biggest I've ever made. And I do plan on sending this out to get long-armed, because I think it's gonna be really hard to quilt it on my sewing machine. So once I have all the t-shirts sewn, prepped and sewn together, I will take this to a long armor. And that means they have like an 8-foot long machine that they can thread the quilt into to sew all the layers together with the top of the quilt, the batting, and the backing. Okay, I'm just checking. I'm gonna do this little area right here one more time, just if you see anything that's bubbling up, you can kind of check it. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, so again, now, one other thing to note, when you're cutting these t-shirts out, it might be tempting to cut it from this side because you can see where your interfacing is, but the goal is to have your pattern centered. So we are actually gonna turn this over. This is actually 06 to 07, so this shirt is 20 years old. I know that my brother has had these shirts. He's been saving them for a long time, some of them. And it's kind of a cool project to get to work on. Different than what I normally am working on in the quilting room, but I do feel the pressure of not ruining any of these shirts. Now see, this actually fits on here pretty well. And it looks like, I'm gonna make sure that I get the year on here. If I lose anything, I'd rather it be up here at the top, because I think having the years on here is really cool. So I'm gonna make sure that I come down, that I'm centering this as well as I can. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so now that I have my design centered, now I'm going to start cutting it out with my rotary cutter. And that's just the waist. Okay, I'm gonna stand so I can cut this one this way. Okay. And then one thing that you can do is, once you have this on there, what you can do is take this ruler without moving anything, lay it down beside here like this, then I can slide that out of the way and I can do this last cut. Okay, so now, see, that looks pretty good, okay? So there's that one. And I really did try to center this design in, so I have about the same amount of space all the way around. I'm a little bit close to the top of the cross up here, but I wanted to make sure I have the years on there. I think sometimes you have to look at the shirt and see what you want to highlight. In this case, I think the fact that this was 06, 07, and the fact that this shirt is 20 years old, I think that's kind of cool. So I think I want to make sure I don't lose the year on that. This one ended up being a perfect 12.5-inch square. The design actually fit perfectly in the 12.5 inches. So that's like a perfect 12.5-inch square. Let me see if I can find another small piece just to show you again, like with a smaller one. Okay, now here's an interesting one. This one is interesting because it's a really, this is curved. This looks like it was part of a jersey. There's also some stains on it, which makes sense if it was an athletic jersey. There might be some staining on it. This is definitely going to end up being smaller. But let's just put it on there. Let's just see what we get. I'm going to lay this down. Now the curve, I'm going to be really careful with my interfacing so that I don't end up getting, I think I have a narrower piece over here already. Yeah, this was left over from something else earlier and it's already narrower. I think I can just use this piece. If you have some extra pieces from before, that works. Let me see here. What happened to my pressing cloth? Oh, here. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that I've got the entire SFA logo on it. I'm gonna turn this way, I think. Okay. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and trim these corners off a little bit so they're a little bit rounded, so that I can try to get as much of this as I can up there. Okay, I'm gonna trim that up a little tiny more right there. Again, make sure that none of your interfacing is touching your pressing mat, because that is going to be not fun if you fuse your interfacing to your ironing board. I'm going to move it just a tiny bit this way. I have that centered on there. Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to hold this all together with my hand until I get the heat on there. Looking okay. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna turn this around just because I'm right-handed. I think it's easier to work with that. I'm gonna make sure smoothing everything, making sure nothing is touching my ironing board. I really just make sure with my hands I've got it all smooth under there. And now I'm gonna apply the heat. Like I said, I do feel a little bit of pressure with this, only because I want to do a good job. These are memories that he's been saving for years and years, and I want to do a good job with this. I want to do a good job. And whenever you're working on something like a t-shirt quilt and someone gives you a big bag of their memories, you want to honor that and do the best job you can. If it was my own shirts, I would feel less pressure because I'd be like, well, if I mess it up, it was my own stuff. But it's not difficult, but you just want to make sure that you're following the process and that your interface is going on there the right way. I'm going to do this other side one more time. Okay, that should be good. Okay, so now this is an unusual shape. Let me see. I want to preserve as much of the design as I can. Okay. I'm thinking if I sort of line that line up there. I'm picking a straight line on the F, and I'm lining one of my ruler lines up with the straight line of the F, because the F is the center of the pattern. And so if I make sure that my vertical line is going up through a vertical line on the t-shirt pattern, this should help it look not wonky in the quilt. Okay, so I did this 1 inch and 1/8. So I want to do the same thing on the other side, is that I want to be about 1 inch and 1/8 away from the edge of my S so that it's centered, and I'll make sure that I have that on a line. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so doing my best to center the design in there, and now I'm going to trim it I'm basing my cuts on, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get that curve in there or not, because the way this was already rough cut, I don't think I can get, I'm gonna have to cut it probably below that. I was trying to see if I could get that curve in there, but there's not enough material to get a straight line. Okay, so I am lining this up with, so again, I'm picking a line on my ruler and lining it up with the top of that F so that my line is going to be accurate here. Okay, and I did it right on the 1 inch. I'll turn this around, and same thing on this side. I am gonna go 1 inch below the bottom of my, maybe 1 inch and 1/8, because the other part's on a curve. So I will go 1 inch and 1/8 below the bottom of that F. Okay. Okay, so now I have part of that design. Okay, so let's talk making a quilt block with these smaller pieces. Okay, so this is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9.5, and we want to get it to, we want to end up getting that one to 12.5. So I'm gonna need to add a little bit of fabric to make this wider. Do I have any other smaller little pieces that I could use to get this up to size? Oh yeah, see, look at this one. This is pretty small. This is just a very small logo. So this is definitely something that might end up going in on the side here to end up getting it. Now, I don't know if this was the high school, this was the college. I don't know if I want this whole block just to be college, so maybe I'll look for some more smaller SFA symbols, and these might not even end up going in the same block. So like I said, I'm not gonna sew any of these blocks together, the smaller pieces, until I have all of the shirts prepped, because I wanna, like I said, this is high school, this is college. They could go next to each other, but I might not do that either. There's definitely some room for some creative license. Okay, this is pretty small. I'm gonna go ahead and rough cut this down a little bit more, because I don't need all this extra on there right now. Okay, get the logo that I want. All right. Now, this is where those scraps of interfacing can work, because again, I don't need a large piece. I just need a small piece for this. Okay, I'll go ahead and trim this. And then I need to also trim it also this way. Okay, so same rules apply. The design of the shirt is going down towards the pressing mat. I'm taking the bumpy side. It's pretty easy to tell. There's like a felt-like side, and there is a bumpy side. Bumpy side goes to the back of the shirt. Smooth it and make sure there's no wrinkles. Apply heat. Oh, that's, all right, so let's peel that off of there. Okay, so now this one's a little bitty. Let me get a smaller ruler. Okay, so I think I'm gonna use this little 5-inch ruler. And I will go 1 inch away from the edge of the design. This will actually fit on my rotating cutting mat. Earlier, it didn't fit on my rotating cutting mat because it's just too big, but this actually should fit on my rotating cutting mat. Okay, so that was 1 inch there. Then seam about an inch away. Go ahead and turn this. Okay, one more time. Okay, so there's like a little another small element. So I do think like these could end up working nicely together in a block because this is the same school as this. So that's kind of a thought that I have. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and make sure that you turn on the notifications so you can come back and see part 2. Happy quilting!